Okay, so welcome back. Hopefully everybody is feeling refreshed, has had some sandwiches, etc. There were some amazing conversations going on at lunchtime that I was earwigging into. Really great to hear the conversations happening, and apologies, a couple of folk were saying that they wanted to have a chat with me about a few things, but we were just busy doing event-related things. So I do want to just highlight again that at the end of the day officially finishes at 4:30, but there is, you'll have seen in the programme, an optional networking session at the end. So we will still be here. There'll be hopefully some sandwiches and such, like, if people want to stay for that networking. And you'll also have an opportunity to chat with people from the Make Your Mark campaign if you want to ask us any questions about the practice, anything like that. Also, members of the Volunteer Organisers Network, Vaughan, will be staying, so you can have a chat with them. Team Kinetic, they would be available online, so it would be about having a device and kind of joining an online chat with them. And also members from the Our Past, Our Future team as well, the National Strategy for the Historic Environment, of which Make Your Mark is part of. They'll be on hand as well to chat about that strategy. So if you didn't get to catch up with folk at lunch, then there'll be plenty of time at the end of the day. So on to the volunteering newsroom. So this is the first time that we've had the volunteering newsroom, and it's going to be run by the Volunteer Organisers Network. And they'll be saying this themselves, but again, I just want to reiterate, and there is a post-it note here as well, if you are coming up for the volunteering newsroom, please stand here where I am. There's a webcam picking you up. We're not using the webcam, I've just been reminded. Sorry, we're going to use the auditorium view. So actually, that's not relevant. But the important thing is speak at a steady pace and speak clearly. You've got 1 minute, but when we've run this before at different events, people speak really fast and it becomes nearly impossible for the BHL interpretation to follow that. So it's just going to reiterate that. But I'd like to welcome up David Bell from the Scottish Mining Museum, from the Volunteer Organisers Network.
From National Trust for Scotland and part of the Bond Network.
I'm Kirsty Haslam. I'm just coming in as maternity cover for the Volunteer Development Officer role for Historic Environment Scotland. And I'm going back to my corner now.
Very good. And I'm David Bell. I'm the Assistant Curator at the National Mining Museum of Scotland, as well as part of the Volunteer Organisers Network. And this newsroom really is 20 minutes of celebration. We've got a variety of people who have signed up in advance to share their news about items, events, etc. that their organisation is involved with at the moment, that they're excited, pleased about, etc. It could be an exhibition, it could be a project, could be any other sort of initiative at all. But the only rule is that they're only allowed to share their news for a maximum of 1 minute. So if you're wondering how much can somebody say in a minute, I'm going to attempt to demonstrate by introducing Volunteer Organisers Network. And one thing to look out for here is our Wizzy technology timer that we're going to be using. So the screen will change shortly, and in the top right-hand corner of the screen, there will be a timer that it's a circle, and it will gradually fill up as you get to a minute. And they're going to be quite strict and stop people on a minute. Okay. So can I make a start?
You ready? Shall I start the timer?
Start the timer. So the Volunteer Organisers Network is a peer-to-peer support group for anyone who works with volunteers in heritage. And we do this in several ways. We run case studies where we get excellent speakers to come in and talk and give presentations on subjects around various aspects of volunteering. This is all done online. We also online have coffee mornings, informal welcoming events where people sit around and chat about issues that are currently affecting volunteering in their organisations. And finally, if people have a specific issue that they would like support and guidance with to do with volunteering, then they can contact us directly and we will give what support we can. The final thing to say is that we have a really good working group, but we would also like new members, so please get in. So actually going to look. I'm sure that will be the only failure. Everything else will run really smoothly. Just remember what Rosie said about trying to be, if you're talking, I mean, you could be virtual, you could be in the room, but if you're signed up to talk, be succinct, but don't rush if you can. Okay.
Sorry to add in, if you stand nearer to the microphone, you don't need to stand at the microphone, but stand nearer to the microphone, it'll pick up better on Teams. Just in case.
Yep, I think, yeah, we'll have everyone coming and standing here, please. Yep.
Great. Okay. Can I invite? That was
I
seamless.
think I forgot I was singing. Okay, you ready? Ready.
Go.
Okay, so I'm also from the Scotland's Community Heritage Conversations event team, as well as the Make Your Mark. There's some familiar faces in here from the Community Heritage Conversations. So we started off as lockdown projects, and once a month we did a mini conference for everybody joining us on Zoom, and we explored different conversations around relationships and heritage. Health and well-being, creativity, skills development, volunteer training, the list goes on. We've now delivered 13 events. Last year was our first fully hybrid event here in Stirling, and we will be back in November this year in the Engine Shed with a theme of new voices in heritage. Very early stages in planning, so please come and speak to me if you want to be part of the programme or you actually want to help put on the event. We'd love to hear from you.
Perfect timing, Rosie. Perfect. Thank you. Okay. So next, if we can go to Hazel, who hopefully is online.
So yes, Hazel, I'm happy to take yourself off mute and put on your camera. That'd be amazing. I will spotlight you. Maybe move on. Come back.
Okay, and then come back to Hazel. Okay, there it is. All right. Gabrielle from Glasgow Women's Library.
Yes.
She's come down. Thank you.
Hi everyone, I wanted to highlight a project which was funded until the end of last year by the National Lottery Heritage Fund, looking at digital volunteering and involving volunteers in writing blogs, in creating podcasts, in digitising materials, bringing their digital skills, sharing them with others, and also picking those up. There's a page on our website. If you go to womenslibrary.org.uk and search for digital volunteering, there's lots of resources, including how-to guides. I'm also around this afternoon. I'll be here until about 4:45. So if you want to chat about that, please come and find me or find my email on the Women's Library's website and get in touch. Thank you.
Hey.
Okay.
Waiting for my timer to start and reminding myself to speak slowly. My name's Jess Wise. I work for RZSS and I'm with my colleagues Becky Angus and Ali Amaviska here today. And it really is a very genuine celebration. I'm based up at Highland Wildlife Park and we are celebrating getting the keys for the first of our brand new buildings. So Scotland's Wildlife Discovery Centre project was born quite a few years ago, pre-COVID, and it went through so many forms of market research, really understanding what those communities, local and international, were looking for from us. And we're so excited now within the next few months to be opening up our learning hive, our conservation den, and the gateway, which is the real centerpiece for this. So it's going to have an exhibition space within that. And I'd love to hear from anyone who would be interested in finding out more, working with us in partnership, or coming to us to host their own event. I'm pretty happy to share. Thank you.
Okay. So Aaron, would you come and oh yes, please.
Okay, hello everyone. It's me live this time. So we, with the support from the National Lottery Heritage Fund, we can support 5 of our member organizations. So if you're a heritage organization and you involve volunteers, many of you are here today, then you can take part in this opportunity. So we can support 5 member organizations to co-design a taster session with a marginalized or underrepresented group in your area. So if you are selected to participate, you can expect support from a co-design facilitator who will upskill you in co-design. Also connections to our network of community groups, and then we will also cover volunteer expenses. So if you're interested in participating, scan the QR code, and also the information's on our website as well. Yay.
So hi, I'm not talking about my organization actually, but I'm talking about the Emerging Museum Professional Network. Some of you may have heard before. Emerging museum professional often get into the sector through volunteers, so the volunteering, so this could be of interest to you. So anyway, just want to say there's a group of people who's trying to establish a Scottish branch. So if anyone is interested to contribute any question, we're still deciding what format it would take. So just look for me and ask me, and yeah, nothing. And we exist and we'll try to exist. So.
My name's Alison Matheson. I work for Nature Scot. We're a government organisation looking after Scotland's nature and for people. So I just wanted to say a few words to promote nature-based volunteering. Sadly, we are in a climate and nature emergency, but one way that we can take action is to volunteer for nature. And there's a whole heap of benefits for everybody, for you, for nature, for community, and for the economy of volunteering. And Nature Scot, we offer nature-based volunteering, but we have there are a lot of other organisations in Scotland that do this as well. Some of them are here today, for example, the Conservation Volunteers, National Trust for Scotland, RSPB, and several others. And if you want to find out more about nature-based volunteering, please get in touch with any of us. There's a whole range of different tasks that can be done with the volunteering, and that's it. Yay!
Not really prepared this, so I'll just chat. So I'm Jill, I'm volunteer coordinator on Fife. I'm disabled and I have lived experience. We're trying to get our volunteer numbers up after the pandemic. So we had about 120, went down to 6, now we've got 40. And we're looking at, it's kind of an idea to sort of pause and reflect on how can we be more inclusive with our volunteers. So I ask everyone what their access requirements are, like regardless if they have a formal diagnosis or not. We've removed all physical requirements of the volunteer roles. We give travel expenses, so if folk need a taxi, we can do that too. And we adapt individual opportunities. So depending on what they need, we adapt as far as we can. And I've got a wee bit more to go.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's working so far and we're getting there. So we've gone from 6 to 40 and we're getting more diverse. So it's all good. But if you want to get in touch, please just give me a shout. I think I'm done.
One. Hey, okay. Is that all right? That's what put you on the spot for the timer.
Sorry.
That's all right. If Hazel just, it's fine. If Hazel just comes off mute and chats, that's fine. Don't worry about the spotlighting.
Hi, thank you very much. Apologies about the confusion before. I wasn't sure if I was the only Hazel. So I'm Hazel from Ocean Youth Trust Scotland. We have a base of over 200 volunteers that we are wishing to expand and certainly become diverse. We are a sailing charity. We take young people to sea for week-long adventurous voyages, which means a lot of people think that they can't do it with a disability, and they certainly can. We have had blind people, we have had deaf people. It is not a problem. We do have a limitation of a wheelchair, and that is just because our boats are not capable for that. But yeah, anybody interested, they are more than welcome to get in touch with us. And a lot of people think sailing is just for the middle class white people. It certainly isn't, so you're more than welcome. Thank you.
And that's our session done. So well done everybody for keeping brilliantly to your bit. So you're right, David, it was just you. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you to the Volunteer Organisers Network. Rightio. So they didn't do the plug for themselves, the Volunteer Organisers Network, but I would thoroughly recommend that you join VON, as they're known, so you can head over to the Make Your Mark website and there's information all about the network and how to join. Yeah, okay, great. So next up with our next speaker is Mariam Ahmed, who is the Chief Executive Officer from AMINA Muslim Women's Resource Centre. Up you come.
Thank you. So I'm glad I don't have a minute. I don't think my blood pressure could handle that. I'm watching everyone so well, speak so well about how they can, all the projects that they're doing. But thank you everyone, and thank you for inviting me to speak today. I suppose what we're going to speak about today, or what I'm going to be speaking about, is how you can engage diverse communities and BME women specifically in volunteering, and why that's so important. So as you explained, I'm the Chief Executive Officer of AMINA. I've been there for about 3 years, and I would say the backbone is really with volunteers. We could not be the organisation that we are today, and we've been running for 25 years, if it wasn't for the volunteers and the women that have helped shape the organisation. Okay, so the work that we do, and for those who do not know that much about the organisation, we've got the National Helpline for BME and Muslim Women, and that's funded by the Scottish Government. Our National Helpline, I would say, is the kind of crux of everything that we do, and I would say it's the feeder to actually explain to us what issues are going on. So is there a lot of domestic abuse? Is there financial crisis? Is there a lot of mental health issues within the community? We had a lot of calls just recently about revenge porn, for example. A lot of women and young girls were kind of experiencing that. So our helpline really does feed into what we feel like are the issues within our community. But we also have 3 other departments, and that is the Creative Wellbeing Project, and that's within Glasgow and Dundee. And we have a lot of women being involved in arts and health, whether that's health walks, learning about dementia and health. What I would say is that health outcomes for BME women are still really poor in general, and that isn't because there isn't an uptake, in my opinion, of any health services. To be honest, I think it's because a lot of BME women or BME people are just not believed whenever they go to the doctors, especially. And I would certainly say that's what we call sometimes the BB syndrome. I would certainly say, even from my own community, my mum, for example, is very, very articulate. But if I go with her and explain something, she gets a service. But whenever she goes, she looks like a traditional Pakistani woman, and she's just never taken seriously. So we have a lot of like well-being that is really important to us for your mental health, but employability and financial inclusion also. So if you've got any help with your finances, we have an advocacy worker to help you with that. Now, the highest poverty rates for Scotland and the UK are with the Pakistani and Bangladeshi community. They're the ones that experience the highest poverty rates. So it's really important that we have that service there. But also, and I know this is, I always say this, it sounds really sad, but BME women, again, are in the lowest when it comes to employment outcomes. So you have more BME women graduating with degrees, but yet we're overrepresented in the lowest paid sector, and we're completely underrepresented in the highest paid sectors. So when it comes to education, when it comes to management, you will not see that many BME women there, but yet we've probably got more degrees compared to our white Scottish counterparts. So if you kind of even look at employability, there is a lot of barriers there also. And obviously we've got our helpline and befriending service, which is everything to actually support women and to help them thrive within the Scottish society. Now, within that, we have a lot of, even within our own BME communities, we have a real mix of communities from Arab, African, but also migrant, asylum seekers, but many British-born BME people also. So it's important. So those are the kind of 4 kind of areas that we work in. It's quite a lot, and it's quite a lot to manage because there's so many issues going on in each sector. We also have a violence against women service. So we have a domestic abuse service, and that is absolutely chock-a-block. So the amount of cases that we get and the complex cases that we get, and when I say that majority of the cases that we deal with are complex, it's because a lot of women do not have proper immigration papers. And that's a big barrier. And if anyone's been following what's been going online and with the illegal migration bill, it's just got worse. So we're actually rolling back on human rights rather than going forward. But what I would say is that we're quite lucky because within Scotland, there is still that compassion there compared to if you're in England. And the Scottish government are still very compassionate about immigration, although they don't have any powers around that. So if you're wanting to actually support women from diverse communities, I think it's kind of, is what I've just kind of mentioned before. You kind of need to understand maybe where they're coming from, first of all, what their situation is. What we normally call is the triple threat. So if you're thinking about the word intersectionality, and I'm pretty sure with yourselves, you cannot do this job anymore without thinking about intersectionality. And that really is about thinking about the multiple forms of discrimination that you're going to be experiencing. So when we've got many women that are approaching our service, they can be experiencing discrimination because they're Muslim, so some Islamophobia. They can also be experiencing sex discrimination because they're women, and from very patriarchal structures. So, you know, women should look a certain way, be a certain way, act a certain way, but also be experiencing discrimination because they are from the Black and ethnic minority community. So if you're supporting them already, you do not know what kind of form of discrimination they're experiencing. In fact, majority of the times they'll probably be experiencing all 3 or have experienced all 3, but then are also experiencing domestic abuse and cannot get a job and have problems, but then also might even be an asylum seeker and refugee and has failed their papers. So there isn't just one thing going on, it's often just gonna with me here. So women and girls from marginalised communities often experience discrimination because of the triple threat. And like I said, it puts them at a disadvantage in the beginning. At AMINA, we're obviously wanting to offer women a platform where they can contribute, learn, grow, empower themselves and empower their communities. And it's also quite rewarding. Now, this conference is a lot about volunteering and why volunteering is really important. A bit about myself, I actually started volunteering 20 plus years ago in the violence against women sector because I really wanted a job as in the violence against women sector, but I did not know one BME woman at all. There was no BME women barely in the sector at that time in Scotland. So I thought, how do I get into the sector? And I found out about volunteering, and I was really determined to get into volunteering. So I got a rape crisis centre job, and I remember I was the only brown person there, and that was fine because I got my foot in the door and I was dead proud of myself. And from there on, I remember just the amount of doors it opened up for me from volunteering. I could not believe the job opportunities that I got, and I would really credit the volunteering journey that I had from me becoming a chief executive officer. But what I would say is that early on in my community, when I would say I'm volunteering, are you getting paid for it? No, I'm volunteering. And they didn't quite understand how volunteering and giving your time can not only help you grow so much as a person, but also gives back to your community, but also can help you so much with your job prospects. For me, it's just a win-win when you volunteer. However, I have to be honest with you, I did struggle in my community to try and explain why volunteer was so important. Looking at volunteering, for example, on boards. Now, in charity boards, unfortunately, they are not intersectional enough. And I, again, have been on the board for Scottish Women's Aid. I'm also a committee member for the Equality and Human Rights Commission. And often, yes, I am the only BME person on that board. And it's getting better. It's getting much more diverse. But again, I really credit being on a lot of these boards for where I am today in my time and my journey. So whenever a lot of women come to AMINA, that's kind of the story that I'll tell them, that listen, you're here, you're volunteering, it's so important, it's going to give you so much back. So yeah, I do come with a lot of enthusiasm regarding volunteering and getting women involved. But when you're exporting, what I find when I'm supporting a lot of women, they're often overlooked for any BME volunteering opportunities. And if I was to be quite honest with you, there are some volunteers that come to AMINA, and yes, they speak with quite a strong accent. Yes, they might not look like a British woman, and yes, their dress might be a bit different, or the dress sense might be a different. And sometimes I would say that even myself, I have been surprised at how it's those volunteers that have absolutely shone right through. But usually what they found was that whenever they went to a job or any other place, people would take one look at them and make assumptions about them, and they would make assumptions. But many organisations also see many BME communities as hard to reach. I would say we're not hard to reach. We're right here. We're screaming for the opportunities. We need the opportunities. We're not hard to reach, but there is certainly something that I think we can do. We can partnership with other specialist BME organisations, and there's many amazing organisations within Scotland that would say, well, okay, if you're finding it hard to reach, that's absolutely fine. Just come to us, we'll get you the group. And we've got that every single week. Sometimes in AMINA, we need to speak to 20 BME women. Got it. We'll help you with that, right? Although we do say pay the women a voucher for their time, but anyway, it all helps us all out. But also language barriers, how to actually get into those opportunities, how to find the volunteering opportunities, but also cost of living crisis. We have to be honest, it's become a major barrier, in my opinion, for volunteering. I think the job market and people in general has become much more competitive, but it's trying to make people understand, and women that come to AMINA understand, that actually these volunteering opportunities will help your application look that bit better than maybe somebody else who's not volunteered. But quite honestly, a lot of women that come to our doors are still responsible for a majority of the household tasks. So they do want to volunteer, but they need it to work around their school time. So that normally means from 9:30 to 2:30. We don't normally ask for much volunteering time from women with children in the evening. And I think that's really is looking at a feminist perspective. If you want many more women to be involved, they have a lot to give, but many have young children or they have kids at school and they are responsible for that. So again, a lot of the work we do is kind of built around our women and their needs. So our helpline, I would say, I'm going to kind of go back to why this is so important. We've got volunteers that actually run the AMINA helpline, and this is our core service. The volunteers are the ones that run the live chat service and the befriending service, and they're the ones that basically help women and, you know, kind of give them the support that they need. Now, what's amazing about the volunteers that come to AMINA, and a lot of the women were kind of like me many years ago, they'll say, really want to get into the violence against women sector, but we don't know how to. And I'm like, that was me so many years ago. Absolutely. You know what? You're absolutely in the right place. And the training that we give to these volunteers is second to none, in my opinion. It has adult protection, child protection, gender-based violence, suicide training, honour-based abuse, forced marriage, immigration, you name it. We make these volunteers get trained on everything before they're allowed on our AMINA helpline. And they have to pass mock test calls, which are really quite difficult because we will throw some really difficult scenarios at our volunteers and say, well, you know, with the pretend calls. And if they pass that, then they can work as volunteers on our AMINA helpline. But that training alone gives them so much. It gives them so much learning, and it really does help them. So with that kind of ongoing training, that ongoing support, it's helped many women who have approached AMINA to actually go on to further careers. Our actual project manager for the helpline started off as a volunteer. Our 2 or 3 members of staff, and one actually runs the complete domestic abuse service. She's also a qualified independent domestic abuse advocate. She started off as an AMINA volunteer, and there's so many women. There was another African women's group called Empower Women for Change, and there was so many women there, and they had their own event on just last week. And I went there, and there were so many women there that were like, we started off at AMINA, we started off as volunteers, and our journey's taken us so far. We really do credit coming to AMINA, the helpline, getting the training, being part of an organisation and in a community that gives us a chance and an opportunity. I have a staff member who is in Dundee. She's from Nigeria. She is absolutely articulate, but to be honest, she felt like the amount of times that people would judge her just by her appearance. A really tall, beautiful, black, African hijabi woman, but she felt like she just wasn't getting any job opportunities at all in Dundee till she started volunteering in AMINA. And you know what? We realised how great she was. We were like, I think you need to work for us. So, it really does help a lot of women on their journey, but also does frustrate me because I don't think people realise what they're missing out on and not having somebody like her, for example, as your staff team. But I think our own societal biases for many job places is still very much there. So the positive destinations, like I said, it is a very, very powerful tool, volunteering. It can help women in their job search journey. And again, I want to emphasise at how low the employability outcomes are for many women, especially BME women. They cannot even get a job interview. And why is that? Is it because of their name? Is it because their degrees are from a different country? Is it because they just don't have that experience? So we do definitely help a lot of women try and get volunteers, start in AMINA, whether it's arts, crafts, or whatever. And one of the stories that I just want to share is about a lovely young woman, Arati, and we've kind of shared the story here as well. But she felt very pressured within the community. She was always very arts focused. What I would say is that sometimes within some BME communities, arts isn't taken as a very serious career path. So she went into neuroscience and she thought, right, this is what I need to do. I need to get into neuroscience, and that's something that my family would really respect. She wasn't happy. She had a lot of health issues. She had a lot of mental health issues and physical issues. So she just thought, do you know what, this degree isn't for me. And I remember, like, in between, she decided to start volunteering at AMINA. And that's when she started doing a lot of arts and crafts. And before we know it, we thought, actually, she's really, really good at what she does, and she's really good at facilitating workshops, and she's still a volunteering at AMINA. And as you can see with the key achievements, she's actually delivered so much, including in Dundee, had a massive tapestry project at the V&A, which was showcased, and again, she was part of that. But she really credits the volunteering that she did at AMINA to actually help her understand what kind of work it was that she wanted to do. And that was not neuroscience, and no offense to any neuroscientists in here, it was definitely arts and crafts, and that was something that had helped her. And the other thing that I just want to say about the heritage sector, I think even for myself, I'll be quite honest with you, I didn't quite marry up how important the heritage sector is to integration. And we've got Anila here today as well. And there was a project called Eternal Connections. And from Historic Environment Scotland, Anila had contacted me and said, do you know, there's some Islamic glass found in one of the castles and heritage sites, and we would really like some BME women from your community to, be part of a group or a project. And I said yes, and that was absolutely fine, but I didn't really think much was going to come out of it. I thought, yeah, some women would go to the heritage sites and, they'll do this project and that'll be it. And I mean, I do a lot of projects. What I would say was that for many of the women who were from Syrian, Kurdish backgrounds, I would say some were undocumented, but we're not there to do the Home Office's bidding, so we don't ask. So, we were there, and, many I knew were undocumented, and they took part in this project with Historic Environment Scotland, and they absolutely loved it. They absolutely loved learning about Scottish heritage, thinking about their heritage, thinking about what migration means, thinking about what being part of the Scottish community actually means. Every time our women get a chance to go to any of the heritage sites or whatever, they absolutely love it. I think it gives them that connection to Scotland, makes them realise that there is so much to the beautiful Scottish history, and they want to make Scotland their home. That is their home, right? So, but being part of the heritage sector, to them, they can feel a bit, I suppose, uneasy because they might not see anyone there like them. So what I would say to a lot of you is, if you do want to get BME women, people and women involved, it's exactly what Neela done. She reached out to a specialist organisation and said, actually, can we partnership for something? And that's something that I would encourage to all of you, not just AMINA, but many other organisations that are happy to help. But women, and from my experience, love working in the heritage sector. So we need to try and get many of those women to start volunteering in the heritage sector also. So that's kind of all from me. Any other questions, let me know. Thank you.
Brilliant.
You just move to your left a wee bit, just off camera. Let's see.
Because you can see where you are there. Perfect. Okay, brilliant. Oh, thank you so much. Yeah, thoughts and ideas running through my mind there. So we've got questions. We've got questions coming in from the Slido, absolutely. But before we go to the Slido, as we always do, first of all, we go to the Teams room. Is there anybody wanting to ask a question from the Teams room? Not currently. Is there anybody wanting to raise their hand in the live room? No? Okay, great. So lots coming in through the Slido. So currently the most popular question for you. Where should we share or advertise volunteering opportunities so that women that you support find out and know they are welcome in heritage volunteering?
I would say look at organisations that are specialist organisations. So for when it comes to organisations in Scotland, just at the top of my head, SEMVO, Empowerment for Change, AMINA, WESREC, there's so many different organisations that are BME specialist organisations. And I actually think on their comms, they would be more than happy to reach out. But if there is targeted recruitment that you're doing, then I would certainly say getting one of your staff members that are doing this targeted recruitment to actually reach out one-on-one to those organisations, set up a meeting and try and see how we can all kind of work together.
Okay, great. Erin, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think all of those organisations that you just listed there are on the community organisation resources map on the website, aren't they? So yeah, so anybody on the Make Your Mark website, there is a map that shows different organisations that support different communities throughout Scotland. So that's a really good place to go and find contacts with those groups as well. Okay, not a question, but just to say that was a really great presentation. Okay, so another popular question here. Our opportunities are generally for individuals. Would you suggest developing group volunteering opportunities to encourage the women you support to volunteer?
Yeah, I think so. I think everyone's on their own journey, right? So sometimes a group might be one of those kind of peer support. It can become that either, but certainly I would say both could work. It just depends on the circumstances of each individual that needs to volunteer.
Okay. There's a couple of questions here around your helpline. So one is around about, are there language requirements for your helpline? And another one is just a kind of a point, I suppose, around about the decisions for those individuals being volunteers rather than being paid, given the specialist work.
So as much as we would love to pay every single person that comes in, we don't make the volunteers do the full heavy lifting, if that makes sense to you. So if the helpline has like a domestic abuse case, for example, it goes straight to the domestic abuse caseworker. So it's almost like they are doing that kind of initial assessment. Funding is always going to be an issue within the third sector. So we would love to pay all the volunteers, but that just wouldn't be that kind of model at the moment. However, what we do try and do is give a lot of opportunities back to the volunteers to compensate for that. And obviously food, time, traveling expenses. So those are the kind of things that we would probably give back to the volunteers.
Okay.
And the training, the time that we give for the training as well. So
perfect. Okay then. So there's one here around about cultural barriers. So are there cultural barriers to the idea of volunteering or expectations about volunteering that are different from traditional UK thoughts and cultures that we should consider?
You know, you would think that, but when I think about kind of more on a religious setting, I do find that the volunteering model's always been there. So whenever you look at something like the kind of Sikh temples or the Muslim mosques or whatever, you know, you find that there's so many people that are there willing to give back to their community, whether it's food parcels or food, or, you know, helping in the car parks, you know, to make sure. So the volunteering element is definitely very strong within a lot of Black and ethnic minority communities. So I wouldn't say it's not there right now. Maybe what they don't, but for them, they're giving back to their community. And I think what's for me the most important message is for yourselves to realise, or to make other communities realise, that actually if you volunteer for us, this is what it can give back to you. Just like when I started volunteering so many years ago, I would say that a lot of the people around me were like, but you're not getting paid, so why are you doing it? They didn't quite get the bigger picture of about where I wanted to go with that. So I think if we can help try and make communities realise that actually, if you volunteer, this is what we can give you, and this is what we'll do, it definitely helps.
And being really clear from the outset.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
Okay, you talked about a really great training package, and that way that you go through supporting people so that they're going to have a positive experience, and kind of not setting people up to fail until they're really ready. So there's a question here about free flexible qualifications that are available to upskill volunteers. Do you know of any?
When it comes to training, it's always a really, really important part, but normally it would be staff that go on the training, and then we would cascade that down to the volunteers. Again, if we've so just this week, we've actually got a volunteer who's actually going on further training, but we felt like, actually, do you know what? It's actually Irati as well. She's going on further training and she's still a volunteer. So there are some volunteers that approach us and say, look, we want a bit more. I would always go out my way and the organisation to make sure that we can help find that for them.
So it seems like you build really quite detailed relationships with each and every person.
Absolutely. And it's really important to get that for them. So if they're saying to me, I want to get into this sector, I don't know what to do, I want to get into that sector, you try and work with them to make sure that you can help them with that.
So it's quality over quantity.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. So here's a question that's very popular. If AMINA was given funds that were dedicated to doing what you, the CEO, wanted to do with the heritage sector, what would you do?
Oh, that's an amazing question. If I had unlimited funds, I think I'd certainly have, and this is one thing that I'd like to see, is more workers within the heritage sector working with women in communities. I would definitely say there was a project like the Eternal Connections project that we did. I would like to see more of that. So more BME communities working in the heritage sector, doing more projects within the heritage, understanding why the history behind the Scottish heritage sector. So definitely more project workers, coordinators, and actually just more diverse staff within the heritage sector, I think would really be a starter.
So that's food for thought. Catherine, where are you? Catherine Cartmel, who's the Skills Investment Plan Manager, which again is also linked to Our Past, Our Future, the National Strategy for the Historic Environment. So yeah, that's interesting, and I think we'll all be noting that down. So thank you for that. So we've got 1 more minute left. Let's see, specific language requirements for your helpline volunteers.
So as long as you know English, that's absolutely fine. Obviously, if you're bilingual, that helps, but we've got bilingual staff. So if there is anyone that needs that, we can try and get language in, we can get an interpreter in, whatever the client's needs are. It's difficult to cover every single language, but we do try. But certainly as long as they've got English, but majority of the times, if they say that they've got a certain language that they need, we'll try and either get a volunteer that speaks that language or a staff member.
Yeah. Okay. So just one last one then here. Earlier on, when we had some presentations around the statistics generally in volunteering, and we talked about that communities are overrepresented in poverty statistics. Sorry, I find that word hard to pronounce. Do you have any thoughts about making it as easy as possible for people to afford to volunteer?
I think, you know, it goes back to volunteer. It is your own time, and the best that you can do is pay for travel. But there are times where you kind of wish that you could start paying your volunteers a little bit more. That I think would be the ideal opportunity. But then I think all the employment rules come in, the minimum wage, the minimum income guarantee, you can do anything. And then before you know it, it becomes a job. But what I would say is that it kind of goes back to if you had good training, skills, opportunities, you know, whether it's kind of, you know, if you're working working in a place that, you know, you get free trips here or whatever, if there's anything that you can provide for the volunteers, I think it always kind of makes it worth it. AMINA, we have a lot of events. So we just had one on periods. We've got another one on menopause, you know, all these kind of things. And our volunteers are always there. They come along. Certainly what I would say is one of the other benefits in AMINA is that there's always a lot of food. You know, there's always a lot of samosas, there's always a lot of food. In fact, to the point where sometimes I complain and I say, do you know how much food is there? But again, we always go to like really community kitchens that can make really nice homemade food. So they're always well fed. I would say they're always well fed. And that's a big must, by the way, in the BME community. Sometimes that is a big must. So.
Okay, brilliant. Are you around for the rest of today, or do you have to head off?
I'll be away about 3:30.
About 3:30. Brilliant. Okay, so time for questions on the break. Okay, thank you so much.
No worries. Thank you.
you. Right. Okay. Brilliant. Thank you for that. So next up, we have the Scottish Refugee Council. So I would like to welcome up Daniel, Casework Volunteer Coordinator with the Scottish Refugee Council, and Gun, Volunteer Development Coordinator for the Scottish Refugee Council. So just a quick reminder about standing here to look into that camera. Yeah, okay, do that. Thank you. Oh,
good afternoon, everybody, and what a good day we're having. Unfortunate for Daniel and I that we're going to be following a really class act. Mariam, you could have stumbled a little bit. I think you probably will find some areas of overlap between our representation and Mariam's and George's in particular, and that's a good thing. Reiterations are a good thing, I think. So my name is Gun. I work for Scottish Refugee Council. I won't talk too much about the organisation. It's a refugee sector organisation whose remit is Scotland-wide, mainly an advice organisation. We have an office in Glasgow and another satellite team in Dundee, but also individual remote working members of staff across Scotland. And we will give our contact details. Get in touch with us, talk to us later if you want to find out more about the organisation itself. Daniel, do you want to introduce yourself as well?
Yeah, it's great to see you all here. Yeah, really amazing presentations today, and a lot of overlap, I think, in all of the presentations. So little bits that we'll be looking at that other people have talked about, which I think is nice. So yeah, but I work in the casework team, so the advice delivery team. Also, I'm wearing a mask today. That's just something that I do for me. I have them in 3 colours and I try to coordinate them with my outfits. And I had long COVID in 2022, but I'm not symptomatic or anything that I don't. So don't worry about that. So
you can speak to Daniel.
You can speak.
Is what she's saying. You can approach. Okay. We were excited to hear about possible topics for our talk today. So when this idea of pathways and positive destinations was signaled to us, we thought, what a really good way of thinking about things, because we quite often talk about volunteer support when we do presentations. But you know what? We do a lot about this, and this is really key, how to include people into the organisation and what they can do after they leave the organisation, volunteers. So it was a really good area of focus. So what we're hoping to do today is a whistle-stop tour of who are refugees and people seeking asylum. Quite often we utter these in one phrase as refugees and asylum seekers, but what do we actually mean by these terms? Have a bit of a conversation about barriers and encouraging you to have conversations about these barriers with your potential volunteers. And then we'll talk about refugee volunteering and this idea of providing an active welcome. More on that later. And hopefully there'll be space for questions at the end. And on that note, could I ask, I don't have a watch on me, could I ask for a 10-minute warning so that we can pace ourselves?
Yeah, I will.
Excellent. Daniel and I are both talkers, which is not good for presentations. So this one here is actually the really short version of the presentation to come. If you're going to take anything from our presentation today, take this. And when Daniel comes to present his part, he's going to repeat this slide at the very end of our talk as well. Again, iterations and reiterations. So this idea of active welcome, inclusion, inclusiveness, is something that has to be done actively. It's an activity and not just a passive thought. It's not a case of if people come to my organization, of course I will be welcoming. It's about doing the groundwork and the outreach and the work to be inclusive. Okay. And the other one is that the idea of positive destinations where people go, what people do after volunteering with you, has to be embedded into your volunteering program right from the beginning. If we're talking about golden threads, that thought has to be from the beginning. So if you're assessing the success of your volunteering program, it's not about how long people volunteer with you. It's not about the amazing, or I should say, it's not just about the amazing work or the hours they put into your organization and how many years they stay with you. It's also about what they do afterwards. Hopefully what you've managed to, at least in part, enable them to do after they volunteered with you. So those are the big ideas. Okay, so refugees in Scotland, who are we talking about? So let's have a couple of definitions and then about some sort of main categories we're talking about, if you like, for want of a better word. So someone in the asylum process, an asylum seeker, is someone who has applied for international protection in the UK. They were facing risk, persecution, danger in their home countries. They have traveled to the UK and they have asked for protection in this country. And I have put the particular article of international law there to emphasize that this is a legal right. People have a legal right to come here and claim asylum. 2/3 of the world's countries have signed the UN Refugee Convention in 1951, and the UK is a signatory. So I always like to think that people are exercising a treaty right when they come here and claim asylum. And the refugee, a person who has refugee status, is someone who has applied for asylum, has gone through that application process, has been heard, their claim has been recognized, and they're now being given legal status to remain here. In terms of volunteering, one key difference in terms of rights and entitlements is that a person in the asylum process does not have the right to work, and that it can be in that process from 6 months to 12 years and longer. And if you don't have the right to work for a long time, the amount of de-skilling, limbo, mental health issues, you can imagine. So volunteering is really a key contributor at that stage. If you're a refugee, on the other hand, you more or less have all the rights of a UK national. In terms of the main categories, for want of a better word, sort of people in the asylum process could be dispersed into communities. So wherever you claim asylum in the UK, the Home Office will disperse you in Home Office terminology, and choose your housing for you. And Glasgow is a dispersal city, is the only dispersal city in Scotland. That's why we have people in such large numbers living in flats and communities, so provided by private housing, contracted by the Home Office. We increasingly have asylum accommodation in hotels. This is a new-ish and unfortunate development that people seeking asylum are put into hotels and they can get stuck there for months and for years, and not living within communities, but isolated, segregated. Again, volunteering can be a huge help and can be your only meaningful way of having a community, mixing with the community. Separated young people, so under 18s coming to the UK to claim asylum, they will be looked after by social work, accommodated and financially looked after by social work because they are under 18, but they will still go through the adult asylum process, that legal process. And then we have refugees. So some refugees who claimed asylum here, gone through the process, have been recognized. We also have nationality-based schemes like Ukraine, Syria, Afghanistan, who arrive here with refugee status and have the right to work and movement and housing. So that's a very much an overview. It doesn't cover all bases.
10-minute warning.
Oh, wow. I talk so much. So this is our slide about conversations about barriers. I will not go through all of them. I've highlighted a couple. Huge on top of them, the middle one there, poverty. I think all of us can recognize that poverty is one of the main barriers to volunteering. Definitely applies here. You can see the support amounts here. So if a hotel resident gets £9 per week from the Home Office, if you need to travel to volunteering, half that money is gone. Okay, so it's really key issue to consider. And learning a new language. So I don't like calling it a language barrier. people don't lack English, people are learners of English. It's a process, and volunteering can support that process. And I will let you, this will come out and be distributed. So have a look of all the other aspects, and you can have conversations with volunteers. We have a few slides on the idea of active welcome. So starting clockwise from the green one, messaging, communication. How do you communicate that you are welcoming of refugees in your organization? And then clockwise, are you recruiting actively? Are your programs easy to engage with? And then is your program refugee friendly? And I will come to that to tell you what I mean. I do mean some quite practical things when I talk about refugee friendly. So here's how we approach some messaging about being welcoming of refugees. So social media, website, really wherever volunteers are seeing, potential volunteers are seeing your messaging. Messaging about inclusivity should be in those same platforms is really what we're trying to say. So recruiting actively, I'm glad to hear, I was talking about this earlier as well. Really the top tip there is linking up with existing networks. Don't try to reinvent the wheel. If you're trying to reach hard-to-reach communities, any hard-to-reach community, there is a network in your local area. It's just a case of finding them. So is there a local refugee support group? Is there a team in your local authority that supports Syrian, Afghan, or Ukrainian refugees, for example? Is there a resettlement team? If there are refugees, people seeking asylum in your area, there will be classes of English ESOL classes in your local further education college. And college teachers are really keen to find opportunities for their language learners to go out and practice their English. Does your local volunteer centre have existing relationships with whatever community that you can tap into? And this is very much our practice, our relationships with Volunteer Glasgow, other refugee support organisations in the city and the country. And each new person that engages with our services, as a part of their triage, we will mention volunteering, searching for volunteering to them, as well as organising events and sending mailings to people. Flexibility, have a look again, given our time constraints, I'll let you experienced volunteer managers and coordinators read out the idea of flexibility. Giving, not assuming, but giving people options is what I would say. So yes, we should have options about digital forms that can be easily completed on your phones and not on a laptop necessarily, WhatsApp and text, but not assume that everybody will prefer one or the other, but actually asking people, how would you prefer to be communicated with? And in terms of expenses, front load as much as you can. It's not just that you're going to reimburse expenses, it's that you tell people as early as possible in the engagement process that you will do that. So they don't have to be embarrassed about asking it, be nervous about asking those questions.
6 minutes.
Okay. Moving on very, very quickly. A couple of things about pathways. A stage-by-stage approach. Ask people if they'd like to come to your events, if you have a public event, if you have a picnic, if you have a community gathering, if you've got a party, if you've got a festival. Reach out to diverse communities to come and enjoy your offerings. And once they are familiar to you, they can do some micro ad hoc volunteering and hopefully move on with those to more complex forms of volunteering. Planning those progression routes, maybe planning somebody. Moving on, and I think Daniel will talk about positive destination.
If you could just both swap quickly, just so Daniel's in the camera shot. That'd be great. Thank you.
Wow, you did really well there, Gun. Like we practiced that once, and we ended up taking a lot longer. So well, you're doing really well. So thanks, Gun, for giving me lots of time as well. So I'm going to be looking at positive destinations and what comes next. I'm surprised how big this guy is. I've never seen, the screen is huge, I guess. Okay, but the positive destinations. Yeah, so we spoke about that. Like, it came out of Mariam's presentation as well. Like volunteers have dreams and goals and places they want to be, and how can we support them in our roles as volunteers supporting staff as well. So the idea that inbuilt into their volunteering journey from the earliest steps, you're going to like involve your team, involve your organization in thinking about that, how to help volunteers to achieve things, if it's they want to move on to work in the sector, if it's they want to move on to education, or if it's they just want to meet more people, then how can you help with that as well? And also regarding someone's journey with you as a measure of success of the volunteering programme, not just the things that we count all the time, you know, like the hours that somebody gives or the length of service they have with us, but you know, their sort of journey with the organisation as well, growing alongside us. So from this, we're taking some of the information that we use for our casework service. So this is the positive destinations, and we use these in our refugee integration service. When someone gets refugee access, we get the refugee claim accepted. We have assessments with our caseworkers where they look at what goals would you like to achieve in education, what goals would you like to achieve in employment or health, and you know, we work through those together with the caseworker, and they'll check in a few months. So it's like you can almost mirror that for volunteering in a way, and it's our role as volunteering supporting professionals as well to help volunteers with that. So you can look at, we're going to look at education, employment, social connections in a bit more detail as well on the next slides. So yeah, volunteering and employability. So volunteering, we know that it massively improves people's chances of getting jobs, you know, that it's oftentimes what people really experience as a barrier is they have so much experience in their country of origin, but they don't have any experience in the UK, that in a UK workplace. So having, you know, experience in, like if they're volunteering with us, it might be in the advice service, but having that experience to be able to put on their CV is like a really meaningful item, really, and you know, be able to give a reference as well. But also in the volunteering team. So I guess over in the green here, I guess we've got like things that we can do in the volunteering team, but we also partner up with the employability team in our work. We're lucky enough to have a small but very hard working employability team who deliver sessions twice a year to help people with their application skills, you know, completing application forms. And also you can use the volunteering application form as like a practice for job applications as well. And our employability team have done sessions to help people to apply to volunteer as well. So help them to know what to put on the application form to make the best out of that application form, and really use that as like a sort of safe space to practice for, yeah, the quite difficult and competitive market of looking for jobs. And also we have internal candidates for a job as well. So like we advertise jobs sometimes just to volunteers. So that's a great benefit that we're lucky to be able to offer sometimes. Yeah, so this is a slide that I created, but I'm trying to remember what it was about. I've got some notes here that are totally irrelevant. Which are about a call I had with a colleague about something quite complex to do with a change to expense policy, but I don't want to talk about that because that's really irrelevant. But okay, building competence and opportunities. Yeah, so this is the way I was looking at it, because we had a lot of people who joined us in some roles which were maybe the first time they'd volunteered in the refugee sector, the first time they thought about volunteering in the refugee sector. Yeah, 2 minutes, okay. So like roles that aren't too complex, I guess, you know, roles that just involve being welcoming, being friendly, but, you know, encouraging people to apply for other roles, working with people to build their confidence and letting them know that you think they could do the casework roles, they could do roles that involve more advice. And then a lot of people will move on to work in the sector, education, help them with things like UCAS references as well, which can be hard if someone's not in education at that time to get back into education. So building relationships through the organisation and having the volunteer coordinating staff supporting someone on that journey as well. Yeah, so social connections, I'm not going to talk very much about that, but the soft connections are really important, I guess, because people sort of lose that when they move, you know, to a new country, especially when there's been a lot of trauma and, you know, they don't have all of the people that they could approach and talk to about, you know, certain choices they might make. So, you know, building people's volunteer, yeah, putting people in touch with each other, sort of networking and connecting people who have similar interests and skills across our volunteering programs and our staff team, something we do a lot of as well. Yeah, so that's our principles. Back to our principles. So yeah, active welcome. So I think we've talked about that, including people's needs to be done actively and positive destinations. So just end out into the volunteering journey from the early stages, thinking about what someone's destination will be, which will be different for everyone. So like exploring their goals and their dreams with them, I guess. And that's us. And yeah, you can get in touch with us there. You can visit our website. And I didn't do a QR code, which would have been a good idea, but we've got a web link there. So,
That makes
yeah.
brilliant.
No, well, thank you very much for that. Just to say, we've asked for the aircon to be turned down just on the site. They're getting a little bit chilly in here, so thank you for that. Okay, so first of all, over to the Teams room. Do we have anyone who's wanting to unmute and ask a question? Not at the moment. Okay. Oh, nope, no. Okay. Any questions from inside this room? Yep, go for it, George.
Hi, George. Nice to see you again.
So you talked about the incorporating the plan, the journey of a volunteer from the community, for the refugee community, and what I've experienced, which is something I think most other organizations that work with refugee communities would have, is that plan is always in our case we've planned with the view of refugees when they're in the asylum stage.
Mhm.
And then once the refugee status come in,
Mhm.
they have so many other things that they need to do. And that always disrupt that plan. I mean, just a few number of them. But I was just thinking, in terms of the approach of making that plan with someone, a volunteer that's coming, they are that stage, asylum stage. Once the refugee status, should that be considered into the whole aspect? Because you made the plan for 12 months, maybe 6 months down the line, they've got a refugee status, they want to move to, they want to look for paid employment.
Yeah. I mean,
sorry, George, we just asked for the question to be repeated, please.
Okay.
George, maybe if I can repeat the question, you tell me if I've got it wrong, because I'll be speaking into the microphone.
Okay.
Is that okay? So you were saying that in our context, when we have volunteers who are in the asylum process, and we can plan essentially all we like with them, but if they come to a positive end of their asylum journey and that they are recognized as refugees, they have the right to work, they have the freedom to move. Also, they are instantly made homeless, because the letter that comes that tells you you have refugee status, paragraph 2 tells you that you are going to be evicted.
Wow.
You are homeless with the same letter. Very practical. We are fortunate in our organization. Well, two things. One way or another, most of our volunteers with lived experience of the asylum process are in the asylum process because of the inability to work. That's just a really valuable thing for people to do, and they are new to the country and they're very keen. And if they then get refugee status when they're still volunteering with us, they seamlessly move on to get advice from our refugee integration team. So their engagement with people continues. But really, maximum flexibility and openness. Actually, no volunteer or anybody has to share their immigration status with me. I wouldn't know that someone was in the process as opposed to having refugee status unless they chose to tell me. Most people do, because you have that sociable connection and people explain, I have a solicitor's appointment, I have a home office appointment, I have all these pressures on my life. We just have to work around them. There's an understanding that to be in the asylum process, even to be early on in the refugee status period of your life, is necessarily an unstable period of your life. Your housing situation is unstable, your income is uncertain. Even if you have housing, the way refugee housing, asylum housing works is that you're sharing a flat with a stranger. You come home from there's another complete stranger sharing the flat with you. Nobody informs you. You don't have mainstream housing rights. It's just a very uncertain and unstable situation. So if you have that relationship and conversations with them, hopefully you can be a supportive presence. We certainly. And then what you do really is take that good practice that you develop supporting refugees, which are our service users, and you apply it to everybody. So I would like to point out when we're doing our presentation, the employability support to volunteers. It's open to all volunteers. It's not just something we offer to refugee volunteers just because they are service users. We don't think that would be a very nice thing to do or right. Yes, it's just a heightened sense of uncertainty, but we have lists of volunteers. I think all volunteer managers know this idea, lists of active volunteers, lists of past volunteers who agree to be contacted by you. And we also have volunteers who are on hold, and quite a few of our volunteers around those times of transition become volunteers who are on hold and still part of our WhatsApp group and conversation and support community, as are our past volunteers. So that continues as a support community.
Okay. Brilliant presentation. Really enjoyed it. Fab work that you all do. That's come through.
It's so kind of you, Daniel, and I always feel like we're sort of.
Okay, so a couple of questions here with similarities. So one's around about disclosure checks and expenses. So a lot of volunteering opportunities require disclosure checks. So it's a question around about engaging with those individuals to support that situation. And another one about reimbursement of expenses and supporting individuals where they might not have a bank account.
So I'll do disclosure and you do expenses. Shall we do that? Yeah. So the good thing about Disclosure Scotland is that they are really good at working with people in the asylum process and refugee status. So people seeking asylum and refugees can obtain disclosures at all levels, including PVGs. It's a system that checks your criminal record in the UK, and this is possible to do for people who are here in the UK with legal documentation, as people in the asylum process are. For practicalities, when you apply for asylum, all your ID documentation is taken from you. So you don't have IDs or passports from home, but the Home Office does provide. In most cases, there are some exceptions. In most cases, you are provided with a photo ID. It looks a bit like a driver's license. It's official ID. It has your photo, it has your name, your date of birth. It says usually not allowed to work. Or if you have refugee status, you have a BRP, which is all migrant workers have that again. Looks quite similar. Usually people will have those supporting documentation around your tenancy agreement, letter from your GP, letters from the Home Office. So all the documentation you need to provide to Disclosure Scotland, you should be able to provide. Email us if you have any issues, if you have any problems, email us. We've never had an issue. And Disclosure Scotland also, I find them really good at emailing to ask you a question if they have an issue with part of the application, something doesn't match, something's not being completed correctly. They just get in touch and then you answer them. And we've never had an issue. I don't know if people in the room have different experiences.
Okay, so there's a question as well in that.
Expenses.
Sorry.
I do expenses. So expenses, that's a really good point. So not having bank accounts, yes, it is true that most people when they're in the asylum system won't have bank accounts. It's not technically impossible to get a bank account, but it can be very, very difficult because, if someone doesn't speak English as well, it can even be difficult when they have refugee status, to open a bank account. But I think if you can reimburse on the day, and if somebody also, if you can do reimbursement ahead of time, if you can send someone a ticket, I'd send someone a bus ticket or a train ticket in order for them to get to your office, so they're not having to spend the Home Office support, which isn't a lot of money, in order to get to you. But if you can't do that, then I know that most people are happy with being reimbursed on the day. That tends to be the best practice. I think if you can reimburse on the day, that's what our finance team do, just through petty cash for most people. And the same with food as well. So yeah, what's there?
Okay, so just another quick question, because we're nearly out of time here. So a lot of people have opportunities to ask someone to tick a box that they say that they have the right to volunteer in the UK. Are there times when asylum seekers aren't allowed to volunteer?
I'm not actually aware of that. No, I don't think there's...
There are times when you may be told by the Home Office professional that somebody is not allowed to volunteer. This is not correct. I can give you a link for the Home Office's internal guidance, which is publicly available to their caseworkers, which literally states asylum seekers and refugees are allowed to volunteer at all stages of the process. Actually, it says they are encouraged, which is news to me coming from Home Office document. It does state that they're only allowed to volunteer for charities, public sector organizations, or organizations that fundraise for one of these. So you can't volunteer for a private sector organization, essentially. And there have been issues with the Commonwealth Games, essentially large-scale sports. What's their funding? Are they public sector? But generally, charities and public sector organizations are the organizations that have volunteering opportunities. So it's a bit of a strange restriction that is not really a restriction.
Okay, brilliant. Okay, thank you. Lots more questions, but again, both be around here for the rest of the day if you want to ask more. Thank you. Okay, so that's taking us now on to our second break. Now, 3 o'clock there. So it says there, see you at 3 p.m. You don't need to come back in here. So everyone's going to go straight to their workshops, and the workshops start at 3:05. I will give a 5-minute warning. I apologize, I didn't give the 5-minute warning at lunchtime. I'll definitely do that for the workshop so that everyone can go to them. So you'll have seen people have either signed up in advance or signed up at the registration desk this morning. So we've put, for people who are here in person, we've put those sign-up sheets on the doors of the seminar room 1 and seminar room 2, so you can check at the break. And a sign up here that's the hybrid workshop that's going to be in here. For those of you who are online, I'm afraid that there's been a slight change of plan due to illness. So the Make Your Mark toolkit workshop that was going to be digital can no longer go ahead. So people who gave us a second choice are assigned into those rooms. And what we're going to do is put on a workshop, a digital workshop over the next couple of months as a standalone event around the toolkit. So keep an eye out. That'll be coming through the newsletter and such like for you. So apologies about that. So at the end of your first workshop, there is 10 minutes to then travel to the second workshop. So again, it's just about come out of that one, have a bit of a rest, and then just switch your seminar rooms or come back into the auditorium. And it's the same for the Teams call, time for a screen break, and then you'll automatically get assigned into your breakout rooms if you're on the Teams call. After the workshops, we come back in here at 4:20, and again, there's facilitators in the workshop that will be doing timekeeping, making that on track. So we will see you all back in here at 4:20 and back on the Teams call. Thank you.
Just reiterate for any